This is beginning with New Testament Greek, our last chapter in participles, perfect participles, chapter 19. In this video, I'll explain the morphology and the paradigms. I'll talk a little bit about second perfects, cover some perfect participle usage, as well as genitive absolute and periphrastic participles. We'll briefly talk about future participles and cover some vocab. So let's take a look at how perfect participles are formed. Perfect active participles follow a similar pattern to perfect indicative, as well as participles in general. So it makes sense in the perfect tense, we're going to see reduplication happening. So that stem is going to reduplicate right at the beginning of your perfect active participle. Then you're going to see the addition of that stem formative kappa. However, you're not going to see the same ont stem. You're going to not have a nu in this participle. So your participle marker will be the cot, the kappa omicron tau, without the nu. You'll be back to adding those 313 endings, and this will be lelukatos. And you'll notice lelukatos is that genitive. So look for in the masculine to find the lelukos as the nominative singular masculine, where that tau will drop off and the omicron will lengthen to an omega. And again, notice the difference in the dative singular. You will lose that tau. So notice this also follows those third declension endings, but just like the perfect indicative, the perfect participles will not have a connecting vowel. So here's all three of your perfect active participle paradigms. Your masculine forms and your neuter forms look very similar. However, your singular and feminine forms, you're going to notice instead of the expected alpha, eta pattern, you're just going to have your standard alpha endings in the feminine. And in the perfect tense, just like in the indicative, you have a middle passive paradigm. You don't have the middle separately from the passive like you do in the aorist. So for your middle passive participles, you're going to start with reduplication and add the infix, that middle passive marker, the men. And then you'll be adding on your adjectival ending. And altogether here you have lelumenos. This is your nominative singular masculine form. Just like in the present tense, the middle passive perfect participles will use the second declension endings in the masculine and neuter. The perfect forms do not have a connecting vowel, so you will not see any changes happening with contract verbs. So here are all three of the perfect middle passive participles. This is your masculine and neuter with the second declension endings, and your feminine will have your first declension endings. And notice here you have all eta in your singular, and you have the alpha shifting into the plural. And similar to the aorist, you have some words that will take a second perfect. So there are several verbs that have an irregular perfect. So we call these our second perfect, similar to our second aorist that lack that sigma formative. These second perfects will lack the kappa tense formative in the active voice. So the important thing is not so much that you know all of the imperfect or irregular forms, but that you are able to get back to what is your lexical form. So you may want to take a look at the principal parts chart on page 304 and 305 to familiarize yourself with which words have irregular forms. These are some of them here in the second perfect with the irregular forms. You'll just want to be able to get back to the original form. Now let's talk about how perfect participles are used. Very similarly to the present and aorist participles, you can have attributive, substantive, and adverbial perfect participles. However, this emphasizes the completion of the action or the resulting state that completed action implies. Here we have an example of an attributive use. This is ton esparmenon that had been planted. So we see immediately Satan comes and takes the word, and we're dealing with the present tense there. However, we shift to a past tense that had been planted. But this is describing an action, and this participle is acting as a noun. So it's the word, it's describing the word that had been planted in them. So we have past time, but that past time is continuing into the present. It has a stative use where that state is continuing into the present. So this perfect participle is modifying the noun, the word. Another use is the substantive use. Here we have a participle that has an article, but it doesn't have a noun that it's matching in case, gender, and number. So it's acting alone. It is a noun in itself. So everyone who has been born of God does not practice sin. So this is becoming the subject of our verb, and we see it's in the nominative case. This perfect participle from genau, it contains the definite article, but because it doesn't modify another noun, it becomes the subject of the sentence. And here we have the adverbial use. You'll see the perfect adverbial participle from anoigo. This is expressing heaven's open state. You will see heaven standing open. Now a quick mention about a specific adverbial participle usage, the genitive absolute. A genitive absolute is an adverbial participle in the genitive case that's used to provide some background information in the sentence. It's called an absolute because the clause is only loosely tied to the rest of the sentence, and it usually begins at the beginning of a sentence or clause. Both the participle and the subject of the participle are in the genitive case, and they agree in gender and number. You want to translate a genitive absolute as an adverbial participle with a temporal nuance. So in the present, you might say while. In the aorist, you might say after, but do not give this phrase the genitive standard of. It's not indicating possession. As he was saying these things, many believed in him. Notice the subject of the main verb, poloi, many, is different than the subject of the participle. So we're getting our participle information and noticing that autou and lelauntos are both in the genitive. This helps us to know that the genitive absolute should indicate to us to translate this with a temporal sense. And now let's cover periphrastic participles. We utilize periphrastic participles quite frequently in English, and this is where the verb to be is used in combination with a participle. So I am teaching, or he was teaching, or the apostles were being taught. So in Greek, a periphrastic participle is where the verb eimi is used in combination with the participle. So edidaskein, he was teaching, gives us all the information that we need to know. However, if you have hein didaskon, he was teaching, this can be another way of saying the same thing. So periphrastic is a roundabout, like peri, or less concise way to say something. Periphrastic participles are especially common in the writings of Luke. So here you can see a chart with the eimi and options, either in the present, imperfect, or the future. When added to a present participle, you're going to continue on in the tense form equivalent. So you're going to translate that participle with a present, imperfect, or future sense based on the tense that the eimi is in. When you add the perfect, you are going to basically be doing the same thing, but changing it to the perfect. So you will take the eimi present and make it into a regular perfect. You'll take the eimi imperfect, and with a perfect participle, it will become a pluperfect. And with the future eimi plus a perfect, you'll have the future perfect. And although future participles are very rare in the New Testament, let's take a quick look. There are only 13 future participles in the New Testament. They're similar in form to your present participles with the addition of a sigma to the stem, similar how we would write it in the indicative form. Lusontos, and the middle, lusomenu. And the theta, eta, sigma indicates the passive voice, luthesomenu. Here, a future participle is expressing purpose in relation to the nearby indicative word, and it's future referring to in relation to the verb. So here we have but the rest said, let's see if Eliza comes, erketai, to save, sozon, future active participle in the masculine nominative singular. And lastly, let's wrap up with our vocab for this chapter. In the next chapter, you'll be covering many different pronouns. So, alelon means of one another. How to means of himself, herself, or itself, depending if you're in the feminine or neuter. Ekainos, that, those. Emautu means myself. Hutos, haute, and tauto is this or these. Seautu is of yourself. Tisti means someone or certain one. And then tisti with the accent means who, which, what. Emas means my or mine. And eskatos means last. This is where we get our word for eschatology. And wrapping up, we have some adjectives. You can see how the feminine and neuter forms are also given to you. Idios, one's own, peculiar to oneself. We get our word for idiot. Kakos, bad or evil. We get our word cacophony, a bad sound. Hasas, as much as. Tui utos, tui obtain, tui oton, of such a kind, such as this. And pos, our question word for how. This is your chapter for last one on participles, and we'll be covering more of these pronouns in the next chapter.